Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of live, interactive client webcasts. Well, we all know the results of the EU referendum. As a firm, we've had a dedicated team of experts focused on this for nearly a year. And we've been helping our clients navigate the issues in a number of ways, from webcasts like these to one-on-one meetings. We've also provided detailed information to clients, for example, on an industry sector basis. To help us with today's discussion, I'm delighted to welcome some of our experts: Alex Henderson, Anna Wallace, Julia Onslow-Cole, Neil Sherlock and David Lansfield. Alex is a partner in our tax practice with experience in European tax. Alex has advised on a wide range of UK, EU and international tax issues for over 20 years. Anna is head of UK political relations and has over 10 years' experience working with government across a range of sectors, from telecoms to pharmaceuticals. Julia is the head of our global immigration practice in PwC Legal and has recently been advising various governments on European immigration and the refugee crisis. Neil is our head of reputational strategy. He spent many years in government on advisory roles, including being special advisor to Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg, where he covered business issues and political reform. And David is a partner in our strategy and practice and has been supporting clients in developing their strategies in preparation for the EU referendum across a number of sectors. He and the team also worked on the economic impact study, which we were commissioned to do by the CBI on the EU referendum, which was launched in March. We're keen to make this session as interactive as possible, so please submit your questions and comments using the box on your screen. Or if you're following on our conversation on Twitter, please tweet any questions using the hashtag ClientWebcastPWC. We will try to get to as many of these as we can during the session. But if I can start by talking to our panel of experts. Neil, may I start with you? The political ramifications of the fallout today from a UK perspective, please.
I think the first thing to say, Dan, is that it's been a big defeat for the whole of the political establishment, and what we've seen, unsurprisingly, very quickly, is the Prime Minister had to come out in Downing Street to make a statement to the assembled masses of the press and, of course, to the wider public. He's effectively saying he's staying as Prime Minister to the Conservative Party conference in October, but he's triggering the start of the Conservative leadership election, which goes through Parliament before the last two get elected by Conservative Party members, and that person clearly would then become the Prime Minister. But critically, no triggering of Article 50 that starts the negotiation for Britain to withdraw from the EU until that new person is in place, forms their government, agrees their strategy, and then starts to open up the negotiations by triggering Article 50. So in a day where we know there's turmoil in the market, political turmoil, actually the one bit of certainty for business and indeed for the wider public, even those who voted for change, is there isn't going to be much happening in terms of the negotiation with Brussels to come out of the EU until we have a new Conservative Party leader. So
that two-year period doesn't start until Article 50 is triggered? Exactly
right, that doesn't trigger, and then that can be extended, but only if the 27 remaining EU members agree to extend the period. Right. So that's how that sort of process works. And I think the other thing that's very significant is because of the divisions within the United Kingdom, where we saw different parts of the country voting differently. Critically, Scotland, like London, was one of the big supporters of remaining within the European Union, and the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, quickly came out to give a sense of the view of the Scottish government about the vote. And we asked Mike Moore, who is a senior advisor to PwC, was the Scottish Secretary in the coalition government in the last Parliament, his views, and I expect people will be very interested to hear what Mike Moore had to say.
Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has today said that a second independence referendum is highly likely. And immediately people will want to work out whether or not that means we'll now become independent north of the border. There's an immediate hurdle to get over, which is the possibility of a legal referendum. Does it need to get Westminster's permission and agreement? Well, the First Minister thinks it's inconceivable that Westminster would hold back given the new circumstances in the United Kingdom. 2 years ago, when Scotland last addressed these issues, things like oil, currency, and the process of becoming an independent country were really at the heart of what was debated across the country. Now we need to address those issues again, and business will need to think through what the risks attached to independence and perhaps the opportunities as well.
I hope that was helpful. I know Mike would have wanted to be here today, but he's actually out speaking with clients. So thank you, Neil, for that. Anna, if I can turn to you now. So that was kind of a very high-level view from a UK perspective. What about outside the UK, the political ramifications outside the UK?
Yeah, so just to echo Neil's points there, of course, nothing changes between now and when we get a new Prime Minister. And what Cameron's resignation does do is give the government some time to establish its negotiating position, because until now we understand that Whitehall hasn't had a mandate to start making arrangements about what that position would look like. Clearly, the government has been focused on winning the referendum. So civil service now has a few months to work out that position. Importantly, they will be engaging with stakeholders, including businesses, to work out what the UK's priority should be. And I guess that's one of the first areas that our clients should consider. What are their priorities in terms of the UK's new relationship with the EU? Make sure they establish those and, importantly, communicate them to the government. As Neil said, Article 50 is the way that we will trigger that exit. It's really the only legal or legitimate way that we can do that. There are some other methods have been mooted, for example, revoking the European Communities Act, which established our membership in the first place. But from a business point of view, doing something like that would leave us, or risk leaving us, in legal and regulatory limbo. Likewise, if we decided to act unilaterally without talking to our colleagues over in Europe, there is also a risk that they might suspend access to the single market, for example, if we sought to restrict freedom of movement. And obviously, looking to Europe, there's been a sombre mood on the other side of the Channel this afternoon. Clearly, the priority for the EU leaders of the institutions there will be to try and minimise this contagion, when some of the anti-EU parties in places like France and the Netherlands have already said that this is an opportunity for those countries to have their own referendums on membership of the EU. Conversely, some have argued that you don't get a domino effect, but what you do get is, now that the UK is out of the way, an opportunity for the remaining EU members to pull together much more closely, and really we'll get a sense of that next week at the Council meeting on Tuesday. For businesses, so in general, again, nothing changes in the next 8 months. Try and establish their position about what they want out of a new UK-EU relationship. And for those that have operations outside of the UK, of course, it's not necessarily just a conversation with Number 10 and Whitehall. It might be a conversation with government and regulators in other jurisdictions who want to understand their plans. Nicola Sturgeon herself this morning said in the context of Scottish independence that she will, of course, be talking to business leaders in Scotland. So there's lots of conversations that our clients might be having at that level to contribute to the policy debate in the next 6 to 12 months.
Brilliant, Anna. You make a very, very good point about the importance of business has to play in terms of what we're looking for in the outcome, and that's a really important point. We'll come back to that. One of the really important parts is immigration. I know you're having many conversations with clients about this already, Julia. Just from that perspective, what are the areas?
Well, I think it's really important to just emphasise what Neil and Anna have said about there's no immediate changes. So for all EU citizens living in the UK, for all British citizens living in Europe, there is no immediate changes. And also, just to echo Anna's point, the government could, if they wanted, trigger something before the Treaty of Lisbon, but it's very unlikely, for all the reasons that Anna have just said, that that will happen. So I think people should feel comforted that this will take a long time. For EU citizens that are living here and have lived here for 5 years, they're deemed permanent residents of the UK, and it's very, very likely that they will benefit in some transitional arrangements. It's likely that others will benefit either. But for that category of people, they could actually think about becoming British citizens. And for British citizens living overseas in similar circumstances, they could inquire about the possibility of taking a citizenship, a second citizenship, in those countries overseas. But obviously they have to consider their tax position and also how they're affected by having dual nationality. I think one of the biggest things, though, is that the Home Office have always been very good about involving employers in any changes to immigration law. And we've always worked with our clients very closely on those changes. And we are now facing a period where there will be tumultuous change, a huge extension of the points-based system. And I would urge all our clients to become very involved in this. And I think one of the things that we've been helping a lot of our clients with is impact analysis. So how this will impact them in terms of their populations and nationalities. And it's important that we help them have that information so that they can really fully engage in the discussions.
Thank you very much, Julia. I can tell you that we've got thousands of clients watching this webcast at the moment. The questions are pouring in, so I'm going to get to questions very quickly. But before then, I'm going to just start. The practical consequences. You really brought it to life very well for immigration, so thank you. But Alex, I know you've had many conversations with clients. The practical consequences of what's happened today. Maybe you could just summarise those.
Yes, certainly, and I think we've got a slide here if we can turn to it. In the past, we've looked at the various scenarios that might arise, and clients are at various were at various stages with their scenario planning. So some of them did a lot, some preferred to wait and see. But in all of those conversations, we looked at a variety of scenarios, and they were in the public debate. And they ranged from the sort of Norway model, the EEA, European Economic Area model, through to the WTO, World Trade Organization model. And that's potentially sort of quite a confusing range still. Now, I think now, practically, you can begin to narrow that down a bit, because we have now got the referendum result. It's clear that we are going to be leaving the European Union. And so if you look at the range of alternatives, that there is, if you like, a package. If you want access to the single market, and that's whether you have access through EEA membership or whether you have access through bilateral agreements, that's the sort of Swiss model, then you have to agree to certain things. And freedom of movement is one of them, and as Julia's been indicating, that was a big feature in the debate. Another feature is a fiscal contribution, and again, that featured a lot in the debate. And other things like being subject to the European rules, being subject to European state aid restrictions. So there is essentially a position where you can be sort of close, if you like, to Europe in the single market, but you must accept all of those things, which is not that dissimilar from where we are now. There are some changes which we might come on to, which clients can think about. The alternative is WTO, and sort of practically, if you look at that, then you can already see that certain things will absolutely change. So we won't be subject to European law. We won't be subject to European directives. We won't have the benefit of the European freedoms or of the directives in moving capital around, moving people around. So you can see, you can look into your business and you can look at the various functions. You can see, well, how will that affect my people? How will that affect my financing? How will that affect my supply chain? Other things are also going to be pretty clear. So if we leave the European Union, VAT, for example, is a European tax. Whatever we do outside the European Union, we will have our own form, I'm sure, of some form of sales tax, but there'll be a lot more freedom for the UK government. It'll also mean more administration for trading with Europe. So businesses can already begin to look at the impacts of that. Our customs duties are another one. So if you're in a business where customs affect you either selling or in your supply chain, then there is going to be an impact. That might be sort of ameliorated under a free trade agreement if we negotiate one. That's the so-called Canada model. But essentially, it's either some ameliorated position similar to now, or the WTO position where we do look at having tariffs between the UK and the single market. And you can begin to factor that into your planning, your business planning, and not just your scenario planning, but even your budgeting as you look out over your horizon. Plus, of course, there are other factors at play, and we've seen, and I'm sure David will talk in a moment to these, the big market movements we've seen. So the movement in sterling is easily larger than many tariffs that a business might face. So I think there is a lot already becoming clear, if you like. There's still a lot of uncertainty, as the rest of the panel have rightly said, but you can see a way forward, and I think now is the time to actually get down to a real level of granularity about what is the impact, not just on my business, but on the different parts of my business, and to really start sort of getting into sort of functional analysis in each business. And that's another thing that we've found, and I think will be very clear to people. Different businesses are obviously affected in very different ways.
Thank you very much, Alex. And David, we are seeing, I mean, I know that you've been working with clients in some extensive detail and some less so. What are you hearing from clients?
Yeah, I guess over the last year then we've had hundreds of conversations in this team and many beyond. And the range goes from we'll wait and see to doing lots of detailed contingency planning, as Alex said. I guess the message I would convey to the people in organisations we work with, public and private, large to small, in London, all across the UK, and also organisations outside the UK who have investments and interests, is I think there's a combination of clarity and humanity here. Clarity in the way Alex described, but also humanity, because for people in their organisations, as employees and citizens, this is a deeply personal issue. It's a shock, whether it's a positive shock or negative. And so there's something about the tone of the leaders in organisations in terms of allowing people to express their views, express how they feel. And actually a lot of the issues are maybe real in the short and medium term, but some of them are perceptions. And confidence is really critical here, because the UK and many businesses, the fundamentals are strong, but it comes from the tone from the top of these organisations and how people talk about it and express it. So humanity is important. I think clarity is important too, both in terms of what do you say tomorrow, whether it's to your families or the next week in terms of your stakeholders, investors and other organisations, but clarity in terms of the granular detail. So actually looking at whether it's financing arrangements, the impact of the fall we've seen today in a number of prices, on your liquidity, what you can practically do about that. What does it mean for your supply chain across Europe and beyond? And what are the contractual implications of that? And if you're at different stages of a deal process, is there a Brexit clause? Actually, may new deals come through as an opportunities? And I think a clear head and a clear process to work through some of those implications is really important. Because what we've seen in all the conversations we've had is, I think this topic has often been the reserve of an individual in an organisation, and often it's been a topic, particularly technical topics. Whereas now we need the whole organisation to come together, whether it's an exec board or executive committee, to work through this in quite a systematic way and making sure all the angles are covered and making sure that people in their organisation can express their views and fears. So communication is really critical.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I think it's great that we've been working with clients for so long on this, because on our PwC website, we've already got a number of things that clients can use, such as for immigration, this is what you can send today to your employees who have concerns and worries, and this is what you can say generally to your business. So I think all the planning that we've been doing with clients has been really good, and it's all on the website. It's
a great point. It's a great point you make. I also just want to come back to the point Anna made, which is actually now, in terms of assessing the issues for the business, is so we can communicate as a business, these are the issues, so that when it comes to looking at the deals that are done, politicians, etc., understand the impacts on business. It's really, really important at this stage. Thank you for that segue, actually, which wasn't planned. But I was going to say that from an industry perspective, we have done an awful lot. And Simon Hunt, who leads our banking capital markets, again, wanted to be here today, but guess what? He is with clients at the moment. And so he prepared this morning this very short video for you.
The UK is one of the world's leading financial centres. Financial services drives a trade surplus with the EU of about £20 billion. Retaining this position is the challenge that financial institutions and all stakeholders may now have to consider. Our research showed that the financial sector's economic contribution to the UK could be reduced by up to £12 billion by 2020. And many non-EU headquartered financial services institutions currently using the UK as a base for accessing the EU market are likely to be looking closely at their operations in the context of the Leave vote. The result of the vote, however, does not represent the end of a debate that has impacted markets in recent months. Months and possibly years of negotiation will follow before FS organisations have clarity on what access to European markets they will have and what rules they will need to comply with. However, history has taught us that the UK business is adaptable and financial services will continue to make a major contribution to the UK economy. The sector accounts for 8% of the total UK economic activity and directly employs 1.1 million people. The result, therefore, should be taken as an opportunity for FS firms to work with regulators, investors and clients to shape a new rulebook fit for the new climate.
This will be the first of many communications with you on this subject. We're always keen to hear from you, and so if there is any area that you'd like us to address in future, please let us know. Indeed, if you have any specific issues, please contact your usual PwC contact or any of our experts. And thank you very much again for joining us today.